The president of the world's most powerful country logs onto Truth Social on a weekend morning and writes to his allies, "I hope you'll send a warship." I hope so. There are no official negotiations, no diplomatic groundwork, not even a phone call beforehand, just a social media post. And this post comes after days of unilateral decisions, attack orders issued without consultation, and attempts to bypass his own Congress. Now the question is this diplomacy or the desperate flailing of someone backed into a corner? Before launching the military operation against Iran, Donald Trump neither consulted NATO, nor called France, nor coordinated with Japan. He made the decision alone, or at least that's how it appears. Now, with the world left to grapple with the global oil flow, over 20% of which passes through the Strait of Hormuz, it is watching with interest to see who will be held accountable for this bill. And the first response came from France. Short, clear, diplomatic, yet extremely firm no. France's rejection is not a routine military logistics decision. To understand this, we need to look back a bit. To what extent did Trump brief his European allies before launching the attacks on Iran? Judging by publicly available information, not enough. It is even disputed whether French President Macron played an active role in this process or whether he was even informed of the operation's timing. Now Trump is mockingly referring to the same Macron with those nice sunglasses, subtly belittling him on social media. So what kind of alliance management philosophy is this? First, you exclude a leader from the decision-making process, then you mock him over his sunglasses, and finally, you demand a warship. France's official foreign ministry account did not merely reject this portrayal in its response, it said, "Stop spreading fear." This sentence speaks volumes. Because this is a warning, almost a rebuke from an ally, France characterized Trump's rhetoric as scaremongering, that is a fear-mongering policy designed to panic the public. Pay attention to this word choice. It is a very carefully chosen word. We need to look at the background of Trump's call regarding the Strait of Hormuz because this crisis did not emerge suddenly. Experts have been explaining for years just how critical the Strait of Hormuz is as a passageway for global energy supply. Approximately 1/5 of the world's oil passes through this narrow corridor. Iran, meanwhile, is playing its strongest card under these conditions, effectively closing the strait or rendering it unusable. This threat is not new. But whether the Trump administration has factored this in, or whether this scenario has been given sufficient consideration in operational planning, remains unanswered. Oil prices have now surpassed $200 per barrel, an unprecedented figure in history. Energy markets have been thrown into turmoil. Many European countries are grappling with both geopolitical pressure and soaring energy costs. And will these countries now be forced to pay the price for a war Trump didn't ask about beforehand? You can ask yourself this question too. A decision was made before you, and you've been left to deal with the consequences. What would you do? Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's statement on Friday, however, represents one of the strangest moments of this crisis. According to Hegseth, the Strait of Hormuz is open. Technically, yes, it's passable. But he immediately adds the likelihood of Iran opening fire is high. So the situation is this: you can pass through, but you might get bombed. This statement contains an incredible level of abstraction. It's as if someone were telling you, the road is clear, but you'll be passing through a minefield, no problem. Hegseth's framing actually lays bare the contradiction the administration finds itself in. On one hand, they want to convey the message that everything is under control. On the other, Trump appeared on NBC the same day and said, "We could strike a few more times, just for fun." How do these two messages coexist? Is there control or isn't there? Is there a plan, or is this policy just a series of knee-jerk reactions? And the interesting part is that this inconsistency is pushing allies even further away. Supporting a power shrouded in uncertainty is always a risky bet. London said, "We are evaluating a range of options." What does this mean in diplomatic language? It means I'm not saying yes outright, but I'm not closing the door either. In other words, it's not a definitive rejection, but it's not an enthusiastic endorsement. Italy, meanwhile, took an even more intriguing stance. First, reports emerged that it had held some negotiations, and then it denied those reports. Japan and South Korea have not yet announced a clear stance. China, despite being mentioned on Trump's list, is maintaining its silence, and that silence in itself sends a powerful message. What does this whole picture tell you? This finding willing partners to respond to Trump's call for a coalition is proving far more difficult than expected. And at the root of this difficulty lies a long, simmering lack of trust. Allies are wary of becoming part of Trump's unpredictable decision-making process. You might be on his side today, but tomorrow you could be the butt of jokes on social media. This isn't alliance management, it's a gamble. The legal dimension of this policy, which Trump is pursuing by bypassing Congress, adds another layer of complexity to the picture. Recall the Supreme Court's ruling on tariffs. The court ruled that the executive branch cannot unilaterally impose tariffs on countries. It emphasized that this authority belongs to Congress. Trump's response was characteristic. Fine, I can't impose tariffs, but I can completely cut off trade relations. I can ruin the country. This logic is not about exploiting a legal loophole, but clearly attempting to circumvent the law. And this approach is causing serious damage not only in terms of constitutional balances, but also in terms of diplomatic credibility. Consistency is essential for building relationships with partners on the international stage. Who would want to establish a long-term partnership with a country where it's unclear what's prohibited and what's permitted? While European leaders may not ask this question outright, look at their behavior: French rejection, Italian denial, British ambiguity. All are different expressions of the same concern. Developments on the Iranian front are further complicating this picture. While Trump claims on one hand, we've destroyed Iran, their military is in shambles, on the other hand, he acknowledges that the same country is targeting port infrastructure in the Gulf. The targeting of fuel facilities in Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and the United Arab Emirates by Iran indicates that the conflict has taken on a regional dimension. This does not align with the initially described scenario of a quick, controlled, limited operation. Gulf countries are currently under serious pressure. They are being affected simultaneously by both the US, their ally, and Iran, which has launched an attack. The room for maneuver for these countries is extremely limited. Moreover, Trump's statement that we are ready to make a deal, but the conditions are not yet sufficient, clearly highlights how uncertain the negotiation process is. The conditions were ripe to start the war, but they have not yet matured to end it. This equation suggests the conflict could drag on even longer. The global oil market's reaction to this crisis may be the most concrete and brutal measure of reality: $200 per barrel. This figure is not abstract. It means the price American citizens pay at the pump: soaring airfare, rising logistics costs, and a resurgence of inflationary pressure. While Trump frames his economic victory as winning trade wars, the military operation he launched has driven oil prices to the highest levels in history. This irony is not something that can be ignored. And at this point, we must ask, as American voters foot this bill, what explanation will the administration offer? Will they say, we defeated Iran? But if the gas in the tank reflects a $200 per barrel price, whose victory is this? Perhaps the most troubling aspect of this entire process is the lack of planning. You enter an operation, establish an exit strategy, brief your allies in advance, negotiate red lines, and prepare for worst-case scenarios. These are fundamental strategic principles. To what extent these processes functioned under the Trump administration is highly debatable based on the information available to the public. Could the scenario of the Strait of Hormuz being closed not have been foreseen? Couldn't it have been calculated that 20% of global oil supply would be at risk? Couldn't it have been anticipated that Iran might target energy infrastructure in the Gulf? These questions are not meant to make us look wise in hindsight, but are the real questions that must be asked when similar decisions are made in the future. And the answers to these questions will be left to history, not to the opposition in Congress. A war launched unilaterally, diplomacy conducted via social media, the greatest oil crisis in history, allies who refused to cooperate, conflicting statements, an executive branch attempting to overstep legal boundaries, and in the midst of it all, a leader declaring, "I am the master of this situation." What does this picture tell you? Where does power lead when used without strategy? And most importantly, what seeds of new crisis is this approach to crisis management sowing for the coming months? France said no. Perhaps this no isn't just about refusing to send warships. Perhaps this no marks the beginning of a collective response to something far deeper: the reckless and uncalculated use of power. The world is watching, and history is taking note of these decisions.